In 1955, I was born into a sect called the Bible Students, in particular the Dawn Bible Students. My parents were members of the Dawn Bible Students, as were my maternal grandparents. My grandmother was secretary to the managing editor of the Dawn publishing outfit. And my grandfather was the assistant treasurer for the Dawn. My paternal grandfather was a pilgrim speaker for the Dawn Bible Students, and my grandmother was a Bible student. In fact, I was a fourth generation Bible student that went back as far as the 1890s in one branch of my family to Charles Taze Russell. In the 1980s, my wife and I worked at the Dawn publishing plant. And you could think of the Dawn as a mini Bethel, a mini Watchtower, with a Dawn family that worked as volunteer work for the Dawn. We were paid $150 a month stipend and put up with room and board. The picture before you here is of the Dawn publishing plant. It used to be a bank that they converted into a printing plant. And there was a warehouse in the back. It wasn't a very large operation, and at the time we were there may have been 30, 35 people working at the Dawn. One of the people, we used to have a lot of individuals come and go at the Dawn, and my wife and I had worked at the Dawn for approximately 10 years. My wife kept the house, and she was the cook for the Dawn family. So she cooked for lunches and dinner and events that numbered up sometimes to 200 people that she would cater by herself. I would provide her some of the manual labor, but she actually did most of the work herself. And that was quite a task. But we had an intimate knowledge of the inner workings of the Bible student movement. My father eventually became the managing editor of the Dawn while we were there. And we know many of the things that happened. We got a good feel for the movement because the Dawn was the heart or the center of all activity of the Bible students movement in America. At the time we were working at the Dawn. Being the historical forerunners of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Bible students movement share much of the same culture and beliefs that Watchtower promotes. Despite the whitewashed history Watchtower presented its followers in the 1993 Proclaimers book, Bible students did not transition smoothly into Jehovah's Witnesses, and this may be something that is generally not understood by the average Jehovah's Witness, the rank and file as they call themselves. While the group that evolved into the sect known as Jehovah's Witnesses maintain control of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, the majority of the original followers of the Bible student sect founded by Charles Taze Russell dissociated themselves from the autocratic control of JF Rutherford during the 1920s and 30s. Many of these disenfranchised Bible students, and there were thousands of these, reorganized into various Bible student sects, such as the Pastoral Bible Student Institute, the Layman's Home Missionary, the Stand Fast Movement, and finally the Dawn Bible Students Movement in 1932. From a core of approximately 20,000 members who remained loyal to Watchtower in 1930, Jehovah's Witnesses have grown into a global religion numbering in the millions through a vigorous missionary effort. In 1931, JF Rutherford renamed the membership of the Bible student sect that had remained loyal to Watchtower Jehovah's Witnesses, in part to publicly distinguish members supporting the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society from other Bible student sects. JF Rutherford went into some detail in the 1932 yearbook explaining the basis for the name change. Those Bible student sects that separated themselves from the Watchtower each varied in beliefs to some extent. However, most largely remained loyal to Charles Taze Russell's teachings and did not accept the new light emanating from the pen of JF Rutherford. In the early years of the separation, it would have been hard for someone outside of the Bible students' bubble or world to differentiate between Jehovah's Witnesses and Bible students. However, today, there is a discernible gap in doctrinal beliefs. However, similarities between the two sects remain, and I put together a list of, I think, the key doctrines that I believe are pretty much the same. One is God's name is Jehovah. Now, this isn't of as much importance to Bible students as it is to Jehovah's Witnesses, but Charles Taze Russell did use the name Jehovah in his writings. It wasn't until Joseph Rutherford where the name Jehovah was given much emphasis, and that was an increasing emphasis through the 1920s and into the 1930s. Another similarity is humans are souls and do not possess souls. And this is connected to the next point. The dead are asleep in a state of unconscious non-existence. In other words, once a person is dead, their soul does not leave them, as mainstream Christianity believes. And mainstream Christianity has the soul either going to heaven or to hell, or in some branches to purgatory, which is not even mentioned in the Bible. But that hasn't really mattered very much for a lot of Christian sects, whether or not a belief is really explicitly taught in the Bible or not, and this is true with witnesses as well as Bible students. Satan is the adversary and introduced sin into the world through Adam and Eve. Thus, all of the human race has inherited sin and death from our first parents. Another common belief is that God will establish a 1,000-year kingdom of righteousness in which Jesus will rule as king. God has called a people for his name out of the world based on the ransom sacrifice of Jesus Christ. This group constitutes a class of 144,000 individuals who are specially selected by God and who will be chosen, and when they die will be resurrected from the dead condition to a heavenly reward, and will be co-rulers as kings and priests with Jesus in the kingdom. Jesus offered himself a ransom. This is a key doctrine for both sects, in place of Adam, and thereby redeemed humanity. All who have died from the time of Adam will be resurrected and given a chance to learn righteousness in the 1,000-year kingdom. Those who do not accept God's conditions in the kingdom will be put permanently to death in a state of non-existence. That there is no eternal hell of suffering, and that there is no Trinity. So these are some of the common doctrines and core beliefs of both the Bible students and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And again, remember, the Bible students were the forebears of Jehovah's Witnesses. They existed prior to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Another common belief is that God will destroy all kingdoms and institutions of this world through Armageddon before setting up his 1,000-year kingdom, and that Satan is the ruler of this present order. Now, Bible students call this present order or world the present evil world, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses call it the present system of things. Jehovah's Witnesses, while much of the language is the same, also have updated some of the language. Bible students use an archaic language that was coined by Charles Taze Russell. Bible students have their own lingo, as do Jehovah's Witnesses, and much of it's the same. We'll cover some of that later. Both Jehovah's Witnesses and Bible students celebrate the memorial of Jesus' death. This is the most sacred celebration for both sects. Among Jehovah's Witnesses, only some 18,000 out of 8 million partake of the emblems, although that number has been on the rise over the years. It's still a rather small proportion of the total number of Jehovah's Witnesses. While, on the other hand, even though there aren't that many Bible students today, all consecrated Bible students, and by consecrated, that means baptized Bible students, partake of the emblems because they believe there's only one call and one harvest, and that call is to the high calling, or in other words, to be part of the 144,000 who go to heaven. Both sects place a great importance on the year 1914. While Bible students believe it's the end of Gentile times, Bible students don't place as much weight on 1914 as Jehovah's Witnesses. Charles Taze Russell had other dates, and Joseph Rutherford had a tendency to move all those dates and then place them onto 1914. And so they have many different things happening in 1914 besides the end of Gentile times. They also have Jesus coming back as a king, and that Satan was banished from heaven in that year and cast into earth. I think Bible students may believe the same thing. An important thing to understand about Bible students and Jehovah's Witness beliefs is that while they believe these things have happened in 1914, they believe they happen invisibly. In other words, Jesus returned to earth invisibly in 1914, according to Jehovah's Witnesses. Bible students have Jesus coming in visibly to earth in 1874. Both Bible students and Jehovah's Witnesses have Satan being removed to heaven and confined to earth in an invisible form. And the reason they call it invisible is because they believe that spirit beings can't be seen by humans. Another thing that both Bible students and Jehovah's Witnesses believe in are that the fallen angels that have aligned themselves with Satan are also invisible, and that they run rampant throughout the earth, causing havoc. And they cause havoc by putting suggestions in the minds of people. So you have to be careful. I remember as a kid, I had to, my mother used to say that the fallen angels were everywhere, and Jehovah's Witnesses call them demons. They're everywhere, and you have to have to be aware, be wary of them, or else they'll take over your mind. And I asked as a child how I could keep them out of my mind, and she said, "You have to have a strong mind." Now, I didn't know what that meant. I still don't know what that meant. Okay, so let's look at some of the differences. Most of the differences tended to arise as the years went by and the sects remained separated over, for a greater length of time. Again, Bible students adhered to the teachings of Watchtower as they were in 1916, so you can kind of think of Bible students as frozen in time, and believing exactly as Watchtower taught in 1916, the year Russell died. Whereas Jehovah's Witnesses have, quote unquote, progressed through the channel concept and new light. So, key differences between the two. I think the biggest difference is that Bible students believe that all humanity, even those who die in Armageddon, will be resurrected in the kingdom and given a chance for life in the 1,000-year kingdom. Whereas Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the greater part of humanity that is now existing, and that would be over 7 billion people, will die in Armageddon, and they are gone forever. There's no hope for them. They are just gone. They had their 3-minute chance at the doorstep, and that was enough to seal their fate for the rest of eternity. And so those that die in Armageddon are dead forever. Although the people who've lived historically will gain a resurrection, both sects believe in the resurrection, and I do believe that Jehovah's Witnesses now qualify who will be resurrected in the 1,000 years and who won't. But they do believe in a resurrection because they, while they're not clear exactly as to who's going to be resurrected, they do use it as a means of getting people's attention to come to meeting, especially when they're in times of grief. They say you'll get to see your loved one again. Bible students do the same thing, by the way. They have a booklet they call the Hope Booklet that they printed. Bible students are not centrally organized like Jehovah's Witnesses. There's no governing body. Each ecclesia, which is really a congregation, Bible student ecclesias, something that Russell coined for each congregation back in his day, kept with the terminology. Jehovah's Witnesses have modernized their terminology, and they call their groups congregations, but they meet at Kingdom Halls. Bible students don't meet at Kingdom Halls or any other church. They rent YMCAs or space at an Elks Club or Odd Fellows Hall or even a Mason Mason Hall, but they rent space, or they'll meet in the home of a Bible student brother or sister. Bible students, I said before, adhere to Charles Taze Russell's writings, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses accept only the most current teachings that come through the governing body. Watchtower believes that Jesus came invisibly in 1914 and that God selected the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society through Jesus, who handpicked that organization to be his earthly representatives as part of his theocracy in 1919. Bible students believe that Jesus came invisibly in 1874 and was crowned king in heaven in 1878, and all of this happened invisibly. God ended the times of Gentile dominion over the earth and the Jewish nation, especially in 1914. And Bible students believe that the establishment of Israel as a nation is proof that God's plan is working according to the way Russell predicted. Israel will be the blesser nation in God's 1,000-year kingdom. In other words, God's going to return favor to Israel and set up his kingdom first in that nation, and it will grow and extend throughout all quarters of the earth. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the current nation of Israel has no part in God's plan, and that that Israel, current nation of Israel, has no prophetic significance. Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe that Adam and Eve will be resurrected, whereas Bible students believe that it is absolutely critical that Adam and Eve be resurrected in order for the ransom doctrine to be correct. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that God initiated the new covenant now for the church, the 144,000, or the anointed, as they call them. And Bible students believe the covenant teachings of Charles Russell as they were published in 1909. So those, I believe, are enough of the differences. Some of them may be more subtle for the average person. They wouldn't be subtle for Jehovah's Witnesses or Bible students. Some of the other beliefs are probably more blatant, such as the differences in understanding of Armageddon and who will be resurrected and who will not be resurrected, and things like that distinguish the two. Now, under Watchtower's teachings, no one can question the governing body. Anyone who questions the governing body faces disfellowshipping and will be shunned. And JWs shunned for very specific moral, culture, and doctrinal matters. They have a laundry list that they actually have published of things that will, in their Shepherding the Flock of God book, and they have a laundry list of things that people can be disfellowshipped for, and that's a means of control. Bible students actually do disfellowship. They introduce the concept. This is why Jehovah's Witnesses do it, because they learned it from the Bible students. The Bible students have not taken and organized disfellowshipping to the same degree as Jehovah's Witnesses, but they do it, and they do it for what they consider to be moral matters, such as homosexuality, adultery, divorce, inappropriate divorce, and so on. And they will shun. Not that there's anything written explicitly in a rule book that says that they should shun, but they will. I remember a specific circumstance as a young man where an elder, there was quite a controversy in one class that split the class, where an elder whose daughter was divorced for another reason other than adultery, she remarried, and it caused a controversy between the elders in the class because he had accepted her into his home rather than shun her. And so that split the ecclesia. So these things do happen. They don't happen in as ordered a way as, it's not cookie cutter cookbook like Jehovah's Witnesses, but Bible students do it, and they do it at the ecclesia level. The ecclesia votes, and they will make a decision as to whether or not somebody should be disfellowshipped. I've had family members disfellowshipped, and whether or not there is an official shunning, it's kind of like on the John Cedars channel, what Lloyd Evans regards as preemptive shunning, where they just don't include you in things. They just basically act as if you are a worldly person. And that's another thing. Both Jehovah's Witnesses and Bible students consider the world evil, and that we should have no part of the world. It is selfish to seek after material things, and so there is this emphasis given on not really attaining much in this world in terms of success, material success, educational success, and so on. Bible students do discourage education. When I was a kid, we were constantly being taught by the elders that education was dangerous, that you'd become either an atheist or an evolutionist. I guess they were right. But put themselves in jeopardy in school, and college was if you had to go to college, just get your bachelor's degree for work purposes, and they would not encourage anybody to go for a higher education or, let's say, a PhD. So in that sense, there is some difference because the Bible, Jehovah's Witnesses are very against, officially against education and higher education. They want people right out of high school to go right into the witness work. Bible students do not accept evolution and are creationists, as are the Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't believe that it happened in 7 literal days, but they believe it happened over 49,000 years in a nice, neat package, the way Russell presented it. Now, Watchtower doesn't have this nice, neat package, but they do say that the creation of the earth could have been thousands of years, and so that's not really too different from what Russell taught. Now, while Bible students don't have a centralized autocratic leadership, they do have a 140-year culture from which they really don't deviate. Russell is still at the helm, even though he's long gone. He was a prolific writer, and his writings are followed and even quoted almost as scripture. And so you'll hear elders give talks where they quote from the reprints between 1879 and 1916. The reprints are Watchtower magazine reprints. They were articles written by Charles Russell. And all of Russell's writings in the 7 volumes, the Studies in the Scripture series, although the Bible students do not accept the 7th volume, they only accept the 6 volumes. The 7th volume they regard as really kind of an apostate thing. Bible students pay a great deal of attention of raising their children in the truth, and they also encourage their children to marry in the truth, which is really difficult because there aren't that many Bible students to choose from. So that's a much smaller opportunity or field of opportunity than even with the Watchtower. Children as young as 12 and the Bible students have been baptized and consecrated, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses officially encourage children as young as 6 to be baptized by the governing body. The one thing that, and we'll get into some of these aspects with the Bible students, but the Bible students all expect to be resurrected to the high calling, or to be the 144,000, whereas most Jehovah's Witnesses expect to be resurrected or to live through Armageddon and live in a perfect paradise forever on earth. Bible students expect other Bible students to live by their culture and moral tenets of the religion they're long established. And if you don't, then you're more or less treated as an outsider. Even if you've been born and raised in the religion like I was, if you have developed a reputation, it's going to be very difficult for you to live down that reputation like it had been with me. I was constantly fighting my teenage rebellious reputation for the rest of my life while I was in the Bible students. I did leave the Bible students sometime around 2004 or so. So I was in my 50s. So I was in the Bible students a good long time. Bible students also believe in the Great Pyramid as representing or being symbolic of symbolic importance in representing God's plan of salvation. And they make many types and antitypes out of things like the tabernacle or Bible stories such as the Exodus, and Jehovah's Witnesses don't make as many types as Bible students do. Now, what makes the Bible students a cult? Well, I think the practices that their doctrines, their practices of separating from the world, they have black and white thinking. There's only right and wrong. They have very strict moral codes of what's right and wrong. They use shame to keep people in line, as well as second death, which is sort of the Bible student analog to the doctrine of hell, to keep Bible students in line. When I was baptized, and no sooner than I got my head out of the water than the person who baptized me said, "Now, Pete, you better watch your P's and Q's, because you're subject to second death." So that was not a very encouraging first few moments as a baptized Bible student. So right away they went to work to putting the fear of God into me. But they also are very, very, they make use of shame very strongly. I remember when I was reaching out to my cousins who had never gotten in trouble and had always lived a lily white life and never had gotten in trouble in the Bible students. And when I was trying to put myself in a situation, because I had gotten into a lot of trouble in my rebellious years as a teenager. I had developed a really bad reputation, and then I came back the prodigal son, and I went to visit my cousins, and I was going to move down to where they were in Florida so that I could be around good influence. And my cousin's husband came out to me and said, the jury is still out on you. So, there was this lack of trust. He had to make sure that I knew that I was being watched, and that I really, I haven't cut muster yet, so I better watch it, otherwise, things might not go well for me as, in regard to the second death side of things. The Bible students very much discourage critical thinking, independent thinking. They think independent thinking is something that was introduced by Satan into the world. And though Charles Russell is dead, he is still the leader, unequivocally the leader of the group. And everybody lives by the guidelines that he had left in his writings. While Bible students really don't seek money, there isn't this central organized group looking for donations and money so much. I mean, there is the Dawn, but the Dawn barely gets along on a budget. I mean, much of their work has been cut back because they just don't have the funds, and the movement has shrunk so much since the heyday of the 1950s and 60s that much of the work that they did, TV work, radio work, a lot of printing, all of that, a lot of that has been given up. But every single one expects to be as powerful as God. That is the reward that they're all seeking, to be part of the 144,000, which they believe is their reward for being faithful, and that reward is to be equal to God. So in other words, they believe and fully believe that they will be like God. And they use the scripture, the Spirit beareth witness with our spirits that we are the sons of God. So this self-delusion is emphasized, even reinforced by the scriptures themselves, that they are this son class, that they are sons of God just like Jesus, and that they will be joint heirs, and that they will rule and co-rule with Jesus and God, and share in that throne on the same equal plane as God. In other words, they will be immortal. God himself won't be able to put them to death. So, wow. I don't know if there's any other group that has such high aspirations in general, because that's the only aspiration that Bible students have once they consecrate and baptize. The vast majority of Jehovah's Witnesses expect a resurrection on earth and to live a perfect life forever on earth and to be happy. Bible students expect to be gods. And so I don't know how much more narcissistic you can get. And in fact, I think the Bible students, their doctrines, their beliefs, really, as I mentioned to my counselor, like a filter for the mental illness. I believe that most of the elders are narcissists, and I think many of the members have mental disorders like schizotypal disorders and other personality disorders. The suicide rate is high. I mean, amongst my peers, my brother committed suicide. Amongst the 60 or so kids that I grew up with closely in the Bible students in the New York region, 3 committed suicide. And that is well above the national average, way above the national average. That's I think I did the calculation, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 orders of magnitude at the least, if not more, than the national average for suicide. So there's something wrong there, something wrong. Sexual repression, the moral standards are so high that even masturbation was something that we were told was a sin unto death. And I swear, I honestly believed that I was going to second death until I was 20. So, there's these ideas that they put into your head, and that could really twist your brains. It's like putting them in a blender and then turning on the frap button, So, anyway, Bible students have strange chronological beliefs. They still enjoy dates. While they expect people to be humble, they also think that they're going to be the most, they're going to be the highest beings that exist in the universe. And I don't know. You tell me. Are Bible students a cult? I maintain That there's no question. Now, maybe they're not quite the cult that Jehovah's Witnesses are, but, you know, I think the Bible students have done a tremendous damage. I've seen the lives of so many of my peers ruined in many ways. Even if they've made success out of their lives, they're unhappy. They're always looking to the future for happiness. Rather than this life, emphasis given to this life, they put off their happiness until the future. That's when God solves all problems. And rather than try to make this life the best life possible and to enjoy life to the fullest degree, the Bible students don't do that. They're looking forward. And they're looking forward to God solving all problems. And so, anyway, this is the truth-seeking atheist. I apologize for my voice. I've suffered from a cold the last several days, and it hasn't returned. And the more I use it, the worse it gets. So, I wish you all well, and have a good evening.